Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I have a very special new recurring franchise to introduce my Overpriced JPEGs listeners to that kicks off today, introducing Blockbuster.
And now, on with the show.
This is a deep dive on where entertainment meets the blockchain. This is something we are going to be doing on a semi-regular to regular basis, which is deep diving into this space. And my co-host on this adventure, this Blockbuster adventure, is none other than Jon Rogers. So if you are a longtime listener of this show, you may remember Jon. He has been on the show a few times at this point. I think we talk about that a little bit in this episode. Jon is the perfect person to join me for this. His background is in traditional Hollywood. He worked at Disney for many years as an executive there. He was at Lucasfilm for a number of years. He has been in the blockchain now for the past, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but 2 years, I want to say. He's been in blockchain now for a number of years. So he is the perfect person to come on and on a recurring basis break down what is happening in Hollywood, in entertainment, in media, and the blockchain, because he just knows both worlds like nobody else really that I know. So excited to have Jon. So grateful that he is joining me for this recurring Blockbuster franchise within the Overpriced universe. And we are kicking it off today in our inaugural episode. So some things we're going to talk about on today's show. We really lay out the base case for Jon's thesis on NFTs and how they interact with Hollywood and how they intersect with Hollywood. NFTs as a creative tool that more studios should be leveraging and should be leveraging in different ways than they currently are. So Jon really breaks down what are Hollywood studios missing about NFTs? What are they doing wrong with NFTs? And then we get into how should they be using NFTs? And we get even specific here. We talk specifically about Warner Brothers and what they've done, how they can do it better. We talk about Disney, some news that has come out of Disney recently. How are they using NFTs in this next-gen storytelling thesis that they keep talking about? So it's a great episode. It's a great base case. We did record this a couple of weeks ago or a few weeks ago at this point. Usually there won't be such a gap between when we record and when we air, but this is really evergreen content because we're really setting the stage for the topics we're going to cover down the line by giving you this initial Jon thesis, I want to call it. So really excited for you to hear this. Before we dive into the episode, a couple of things. One, I've been mentioning that we have the Overpriced JPEGs Substack newsletter. If you are not a subscriber, you should totally go check it out and subscribe. We'll put the link in the show notes. Every Monday, we have guest experts who are writing pieces for us about really anything, whatever they're an expert on. We've been bringing in folks that we think have really interesting opinions. So this past Monday, for example, my friend Blake Finucane wrote a great piece really breaking down which luxury fashion player is doing the best job in the metaverse. If you want to find out who she thinks she is absolutely dominating the metaverse in the fashion space, go subscribe to the Substack. You can find that at that newsletter that came out this past Monday. Jon Rogers, who's of course on the program today, is going to be doing some guest writing for us and has so many interesting thoughts, as I've said. So go check out the newsletter. And of course, if you are here, subscribe here. So you can subscribe. If you're on YouTube, please, it means the world to us if you subscribe to our content on YouTube. That way you never miss an episode. If you are listening to this on your podcast app, go ahead and hit that little plus button wherever you are, Apple, Spotify, et cetera, so that you don't miss an episode. And the algorithms know that we are worthy content that should be spread to the masses. So much appreciated. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this ad from our sponsor before my conversation with Jon Rogers. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OPENSEA, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OpenSea user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OpenSea, you use OpenSea, but did you know that OpenSea now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OpenSea. This Drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OpenSea right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. This is Blockbuster. I am Carly Riley. You know me as the host of Overpriced JPEGs, of course, and I am joined here today with Jon Rogers. If you listen to my podcast, y'all know Jon Rogers, former Disney exec, gigabrain, Web3, Hollywood IP strategizer. Jon, we didn't talk about what you wanted your title or intro to be in advance in case that wasn't abundantly obvious. Jon, feel free to introduce yourself, but very excited to be kicking off this new thing.
Hello, GM everyone. Welcome to Blockbuster. I guess I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. So I come to the team here with 25 years of media entertainment experience. If you want to rewind to kind of where I began, I started off at an agency working with Lucasfilm. So I was on the agency side, helping them with the Star Wars brand. And one day, the head of marketing at Star Wars, Jim Ward, called me and asked if I wanted to join the team. And I jumped over to the client side and worked at Lucasfilm for a couple of years on the Star Wars brand and some of the prequels, and jumped over to Disney and was the founding executive of Disney's franchise development function and oversaw live action franchise development for Walt Disney Studios for about a decade before I moved to Oregon for a life change. I joined you from Beaverton, Oregon, where I currently sit. I've been working in Web3 and Web3 storytelling full-time for over 2 years now at this point. So I started off with one consulting project and went down the rabbit hole and haven't looked back.
And to give folks some context into this, Jon, you and I talk, I don't know, maybe once a month, maybe more than once a month. I mean, you're constantly sending me news and updates, and I can't keep up with you with how many updates and text message updates you send me. And then usually at least once a month, we get a chance to actually hop on a call. And they're always just such insightful conversations because you come with such a wealth of knowledge from all your past experience and what you're doing now. And so I had the feeling for a long time of like, God, we need to start recording these conversations we're having on a pretty regular basis so that everybody else can benefit from all the knowledge you drop on me all the time. And I think you simultaneously were having some thoughts around wanting to put more down on paper, metaphorically speaking, in this case, not paper, but like getting out there with all of your insights more, and had the name Blockbuster, the very clever name Blockbuster, floating around in your head as well. So, so yes, starting this, I think probably something that we're trying to do monthly, where you and I just come together and we chat about what's happening in Hollywood. Where does the blockchain fit into that? How is storytelling on the blockchain evolving, playing out? What's happening in that world? And we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah,
starting
exactly.
with a commitment that you and I can both hopefully maintain
Yeah, and
once a month.
Hopefully there'll be a companion newsletter coming soon that might be a little bit more frequent than a monthly podcast, and keep building from there. But what I'm really excited about and what's happening in the space is that Hollywood's going to be at a real point, and it is happening right now, and it's going to increasingly be so, where it's the convergence of a couple of megatrends. Primarily what I'm looking at is it's not really just the rise of Web3 and Web3 storytelling. That is one of the megatrends. But we're also at a point where there's a real rethinking around the streaming services and how they're developing content, how much content they're developing. There's probably going to be a great unbundling. So over the last couple of years, they've acquired a lot of content. Disney spent $70-some billion to acquire Fox. There's a lot of hangover in Hollywood among the studios about the debt that's been there. And so you're already seeing the news about HBO Max dropping Westworld because the cost of maintaining the content is more than they can justify. So there's going to be this unbundling of content, I believe. And then the third mega trend is really the changing audience dynamic. The audience today, and I'm speaking about more of the younger audience, is much different than any generation that's come before. Now we say that with every young generation, those damn kids today. But the younger generation today, which I'll call the Generation Z, really just showing very different audience engagement dynamics than has ever been seen before. And that's really going to be a change for the industry. So we're seeing these trends come together. And what I hope we do with this podcast and then the newsletter is that this really becomes a lens as it happens, that we document it and identify it in real time. And the example I love to give is that when you look at your iPhone, the change year to year might be relatively small. Some years might be bigger than others, but it's relatively small. But when you look back over 8 years, it's massive. The phones are much different, and that's going to continue. And I think the same thing's going to happen here. We're going to track this on a month-to-month basis, and the changes might be small. But when we look back in 18 months, they're going to be massive. And so I love that this is going to be a vehicle to really track that in real time and talk about it and just identify who's helping to create this new future, who's scared of this new future, and who's kind of living in denial and putting their head in the sand, trying to pretend it's not existing.
As we do some of this context setting here, I'll also mention, you can go back. John's been on the podcast twice, which is too few times, frankly, but 3 times. Okay, I was going to say, there's no way. That's right. We did that bonus episode. So John's been on the podcast 3 times before. You can go find past episodes with him. And I know in one of those, we talked a little bit about your what do you call it? An architectural?
Yeah, architectural innovation. So when we talk about these mega trends, this one mega trend, which is the Web3 part, there's multiple subparts. And one of those is architectural innovation. So what does that mean? Well, in the world of innovation research, if you know much about that space, there was a researcher named Clayton Christensen is the biggest name. But there's another researcher, I forget her name, out of Harvard, who came up with this idea of architectural innovation. And what it means is that some kinds of innovations, when they come along, in order to adopt them, companies have to fundamentally reorganize how they operate. Otherwise, you can't take advantage of it. And what that does is it creates a moment of opportunity and a moment of crisis. So if you're a big leader in a space and you don't take advantage of that opportunity, small upstarts or startups can take advantage and catch up, or your competitors who might be behind can catch up and surpass or beat you. And so what I believe is Web3 and all of the different, not only the audience-facing aspects of it, but the behind-the-scenes business operations implications, is an architectural innovation for the media companies. And what we're going to see is those companies that embrace it and build on it can get ahead, and those that don't will fall behind. So what's an example of one? Well, I'll talk about streaming and Netflix. You look at where Netflix was in, say, 2008, and they were the first to embrace streaming. Everyone was a couple of years late, like 8-9 years later, to catch up. And Netflix had gone from being a small little mail order DVD company to being a peer. Yeah, we talk about the big 5 studios, but really we're talking about the big 6 again now with Netflix.
Yeah, to becoming like they became the entertainment industry. It felt like they were the movie industry for a couple of years. They in that sweet spot where they felt like they had sort of a monopoly on streaming, and everybody had moved to streaming. It was an amazing time. So we are going to be tracking this over month, looking at what is happening in the space. Again, in many ways, me absorbing John's knowledge and wisdom. Is that where this was all started? Was just a monthly phone call, essentially, between John and myself. John has laid out his thesis, the 3 mega trends that are all converging, that are leading to really big changes that over the long term, 18 months, 24 months, I think you're more ambitious than I am. I'm not sure. I don't know how big the change will be in 18 months. But I'm much more confident on the change in 5 years.
I'm trying to be a little more aggressive on my timelines, because whenever I throw out, it's going to be 2 years down the road or 4 years down the road, I've been wrong by 50% or by double.
A magnitude, yeah.
So you might think I might be thinking 36 months. So I'm just going to cut that in half and say 18 months now, because I've been wrong every time when I've tried to predict how fast this is going to come.
So let's start with Hollywood news. I think we'll talk about Hollywood news. We'll talk about Web3 news. We'll talk about where these are intersecting. In most cases, we're talking about the intersection. You had laid out a couple of pieces of intersecting kind of Hollywood Web3 news that you thought were interesting. You have Vaynerwatt, Mastercard, MoviePlex. Let's maybe just go through these boom, boom, boom with some quick hit news bites that we want to put on people's radars.
Yeah. So in the last couple of weeks, one of the announcements that got my attention was the announcement of the formation of a new production studio called Vaynerwatt. It's 3 co-founders, Eric Wattenberg and Matt Higgins. I don't know their backgrounds very much. I know one of them was an agent, like at CAA, I believe. But what's really notable here is one of the third co-founder is Gary Vaynerchuk. And so this
apparently the most important, because it's called Vaynerwatt, right? I mean, I guess there's two names in there. There's only 2 of the founders got their name in there.
I think when you look at the profile of the founders, that how many people know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, yeah, you lead with Gary Vaynerchuk. But what's really notable here is now this is more of a traditional play. This is three individuals experienced starting up a new production company to create original film and television projects that they would then produce and hopefully sell into, say, a streamer or a broadcaster. But what's really notable here is it's a Web3 personality in Gary Vaynerchuk taking the lead. And what we know about Gary, and I don't know him personally, but what we know and how much of a champion he is around Web3 storytelling, I have to believe this is going to be a vehicle for Web3 storytelling projects, or at least Web3 enabled storytelling. What Disney likes to call next generation storytelling, a term I'm a big fan of, by the way. So we'll probably use it here quite a bit. I believe that this is a vehicle that they will use for next generation storytelling. And I think it's an important project to track and to follow along with as they stand up and start operating.
I mean, presumably, we know he wants to make movies out of his VFriends characters. Now he's got the animation side. I know they're making a lot of animation hires, but I can't imagine there's not a tie-in here.
There has to be.
Not knowing for sure. Okay, Mastercard number 2, they announced an emerging artist program on Polygon. Very interesting. Anything more you want to say?
Yeah,
here?
just that I think we're going to see more of these, and I'm very excited about that announcement. I love the layer 2s. That'll be a theme that we talk about quite a bit. I think layer 2s are really the platform that mass adoption has to be built on, and Polygon is certainly one of the, maybe arguably right now, the leading layer 2 solution. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited that this is a major global brand and Mastercard stepping into the space with what appears to be a very well-developed, thought-out program. And we've seen some announcements recently, I won't name the guilty parties, where there have been not such well-thought-out big brands entering the space. And so I just look at it as it's a victory for the space. It's good news for everyone working and building here, and it excites me.
And it was interesting to me because Mastercard is a credit card company. It's interesting to me, this dynamic where you have the Visa Creators Program. Like, why do these credit cards get in the? Yeah, why are they relevant in IP and Hollywood?
What I'm looking at is more like the American Express example, where if you have an American Express card, say a gold card or certainly a platinum card, you can get tickets or first chance to buy tickets to, for instance, here in Portland, we just had Lizzo up like a week or two ago. You get a chance to get Lizzo tickets before anyone else. That's been very successful for them. I look at this as really being kind of a Web3 related type project like that, where you're going to get loyalty, first access to great acts that are building in Web3. It's frankly going where the younger consumers are. We were talking about that megatrend, that this new younger consumer base is consuming content in ways and in places that are very different than what we've expected in the past. And I think that's Mastercard stepping in that direction. So another project that I'm excited about.
MoviePlex. I don't know much about this, so you have to.
MoviePlex was an announcement. At this point, it's just an announcement.
Okay.
It's not an operating service. What they announced about, I'd say in the beginning of January of this year, was that they were going to start up a marketplace on OpenSea, so it built on OpenSea, where you could buy a token version of a film. Now, the library of films they're pulling from is from one of their partners. These are more obscure European documentaries, so it's not big budget,
not Legally Blonde.
It's not Marvel. Let's put it that way.
Got it.
But it's still, the idea is interesting that they're going to sell tokens that give you access to these films. We've seen a different spin on this recently with Movieverse, which is from Warner Brothers and a partnership with the Illuvio blockchain. They did their first one with Lord of the Rings. So it's something with the track. What I think is also notable here is it didn't launch. They went to the aspect of issuing a big public announcement, press release, and then released a trailer, which we should put a link in the show notes to the trailer. All I can say is just watch it. They could have used some work on the trailer.
In a world full of mediocre movies and TV shows, a new hero appears to face the enemy. Meet MoviePlex, a service that will fight boredom by bringing you the best independent films from around the world.
It's something to watch. I don't know where it's going to go, but I expect to see a lot more of these. Oh, we're going to sell movies as a token, and you can access it digitally as a token.
Why can't Warner just do a like good release on Ethereum. Like I don't understand. They use Palm, they use whatever you just mentioned, Alluvio. I'm like, I don't understand Warner's aversion to just like having a successful drop on Polygon or just ETH layer 1. Like it feels like they are committed to choosing obscure alt chains with like very mediocre drops.
Well, they have a relationship with Nifty's. Nifty's did the game of
Palm.
Which is built on Palm, right. And they did.
Warner has isn't Warner an investor in Palm? I've said this now like 3 times on the podcast.
I don't know.
Confirm this. Yes, Warner Brothers backs Palm NFT Studio.
So they're
the $27 million series. So that's at the heart of this is usually like, they wanted to control that side of things too, and thought they could make a chain a thing because the IP they have, and I think it's a miscalculation.
Yeah. Now, in full disclosure, I've had meetings with the team at Warner Brothers. I know Josh and the team that he's been building there. I know that they're very earnest about wanting to do great things in the space. Warner's is going through a big moment of transition with a Discovery merger or acquisition or reverse acquisition, really, if you really want to look at it the right way. And but there definitely things haven't worked well so far, but they're definitely trying to incorporate learnings and build on that. I give them credit for being in the space and participating.
I totally agree. And that's what I've said every time is like, Warner has done so much. I do think they've had a lot of like swings and misses, but obviously plenty of brands have. And they have, I agree, they seem earnest for the most part. And, we don't have to get into some specific projects. I feel like there were some specific Warner projects you were more mixed on that I actually thought were more interesting, or I didn't feel as critical of as. So, it depends on the drop. I totally agree with you. They're trying. They get credit for trying.
But you want to look at Nifty's, and then because we had a little bit of news with Recur recently. Recur is rebranding and they're pivoting their business model. This has been in the last couple of weeks. So when I look at Nifty's and Recur, I just see that they came to market with a thesis that has not quite panned out. Now the market is a lot different today than it was when they launched 18 months ago, 14 months ago. So I just think there's a moment of transition happening that they need to make. And
that thesis being we can just sell digital collectibles off the back of strong enough IP, and that in and of itself can be a business model. Is if we have Nickelodeon, if we have Looney Tunes, if we have whatever other IP, they each brought on, that will do the work.
Yeah, I think there was a thesis that if you have great IP, let's just say a Rugrats is one of the ones that's on Recur. If you have a great IP like Rugrats, the fans are going to come. That the fans are just so rabid for this content, these IPs, that they're just going to make that step into Web3. And the learning here is that until the UX improves, until the messaging improves, until the whole experience improves, those fans aren't making that leap right now, that it's still too early. And that might be part of the example here. It might just be that some of these projects are just too soon.
Well, the other disconnect is that, I think in the example with Recur, I know, for example, a lot of the partners they brought on, I mean, they have, you mentioned Rugrats, they have, I think, Star Trek, they have a bunch of Nickelodeon properties, actually, I think.
Yeah, mostly their relationship is mostly with Paramount, Viacom.
Yes. And so, but what seems strange is that it seems like the onus has been put on Recur to do the marketing.
And that's the pivot.
Marketing push in the channels where the fans exist.
That's right. And that's the pivot they're making right now, which is they built a set of tools. They do a deal with a brand, I'll just say Rugrats. And then the onus is on Recur to market that launch, to manage it, and to build that community. When they're not really so tied to the brand as an insider is, to really know that community very well. So what their pivot is right now, besides the rebrand, is that they're now going to essentially, I don't think it's a SaaS model, but it's somewhat like a SaaS model where they're going to license out their tools. And so you, Paramount, now are going to use our tools to take whatever IP in your catalog you want to launch, and then you're going to launch it, and you're going to manage that community. And you're going to oversee that aspect. I'm
just imagining a bunch of, backroom people tearing their hair out, being like, F that, like, you manage the community. I'm not dealing with this shit anymore.
Well, there's 2 points here that I think are really relevant for this blockbuster kind of idea, which is the first is the Hollywood studios are not ready or equipped to handle the community relation, to handle Discord in a friendly audience, let alone the Web3 audience, which can be brutal. So they're not. I mean, I've seen multiple projects I'm personally involved in where it's just like the communities can be brutally harsh. I love you.
Nobody wants us. We curse like get them the F out of our. This is not our jurisdiction anymore.
Yeah.
None of these studios are going to want this. I can tell you that much. We're like, it's all about community, and then nobody wants the community.
So the studios aren't ready to take on the community aspect. And then just the technical knowledge aspect, which presumably there'll be some consulting services to help out. But how does a blockchain work? What's the difference between the Palm blockchain, Ethereum, Polygon, Flow, Solana, and on and on? That the studios don't have the in-house talent other than maybe that one crazy man or woman in the corner that people are afraid of. They don't really have the in-house talent right now to do that. So
here's the question in this restructuring, because I think that's interesting, and I've certainly tracked Recur for a while, but haven't been closely monitoring this shift. Who owns the IP for the NFT versions? This is something you and I have talked about a lot before, and you've been kind of critical of these big studios who have been very quick to do licensing and promotional deals with things like Recur. We've seen it with Vivi. We've seen it sounds like with Nifty's, where these big studios will license their IP out as opposed to, publishing the IP in the form of NFTs themselves. And you've been critical of that, like I said, which I think is interesting. In this new model, will Paramount, for example, be able to retain? Is this like they're self-publishing it, or is Recur still getting some sort of licensing deal there?
I would believe that this is their more along the lines that they're self-publishing, that Recur would be getting a fee for the use of their tools. Obviously, I haven't looked at their contracts, so I don't know for certain, but the way I would expect it to be structured is that Recur is getting a fee, like a monthly fee for the use of the tools, and that the studio has control of the IP and the ownership of the IP.
So you're probably pretty in favor of this.
I think it's a better step forward. I think one of the things, let's go back to the Nifties and the Game of Thrones example. They had a challenge launch. I'll forgive them for that, right? It's a tough space. Some mistakes were made, but they're correcting those mistakes, and that's good. They're going to build a community, hopefully, and they're correcting the mistakes. The one mistake that I think was the most egregious and the one that got the least attention is that there were actually errors in the mythology, the storytelling of what was published. So in Game of Thrones, like
you don't want to throw up like Game of Thrones, you got this diehard fan base. You don't want to be screwing up the mythology.
Yeah, so like dire wolves associated with characters that would never be associated with dire wolves, or wearing costumes that they would never be wearing. Those little details are what the fan bases really care a lot about. I mean, try to have a conversation with a Star Wars hardcore fan about the composition of the band in the cantina scene. Like, these details matter, and that the studios need to incorporate these projects into their pipeline that oversees their franchises to make sure that the mythology is being respected and communicated properly to these new projects. And that didn't seem to happen yet.
You mentioned, the Warner Brothers team, so I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable spot where you have conversations with a lot of these studios, and I don't know what you can or cannot disclose, but details like that being missed is such a clear indication to me of this was an under-resourced drop. And to what extent should we read this as these big studios aren't really sure yet about NFTs or Web3 and aren't really confident in it? They're afraid of missing the next big thing, so they're throwing some money at it. But they're not throwing the right amount of money on it because they're not really confident that it matters yet. Is that the right read on why something like that goes wrong?
I think the way I'd read it is, first of all the studios are interested in the space. I mean, they either have one or multiple people working in the space and researching it. They've all probably taken a little bit of a slower road since sort of the FTX collapse. FTX, from my perspective, what I've seen on the ground, has done a lot of damage in terms of not really scaring people away, but maybe slowing partners and brands from entering the space down. So my take is that the studios are still moving ahead. The problem really is that I see is that they're being managed in the wrong place. So, and this kind of rewinds to when Disney was starting up its franchise team. And the question is, where's your focus? Do you want to create stuff, merchandising, and see the merchandising as alternative revenue to go along with the movie or the TV show? And is that what the focus should be? Or should the focus be on a brand strategy that grows it long term and builds it around storytelling? And the consumer products, the merchandise, the stuff is a byproduct of doing that job well. And Disney started in the latter, on the merchandise side. And we pivoted, and we were able to get them to pivot and say, no, this is more about a brand strategy and really telling storytelling and mapping out that storytelling long term, and let the consumer products become a byproduct. And that means some opportunities have to be missed or will be missed, and some will be built. And that's where a lot of the other studios have gone wrong, is that they've just focused on the merchandising side of it. And I think in this space, what's happening with Web3 is it's immediately gone into merchandising. Oh, it's a licensing opportunity. And I understand that's easy to get your head around. Licensing is something everyone knows. It's something that's possible in Web3 right this moment. So it's being managed by the licensing teams as a merchandise product. It needs to be spun into really the development teams, the storytelling teams, and be tied closer as an adjunct that accompanies and supports the film or the television show, and really thought of in that regard. And that hasn't happened yet. Disney is probably, from what I know, just because A, they're structured better than all the other studios to do it, and B, they had the team that was set up with Mike White to really think of it in this way, that they're really probably the best, and they're not even that far along yet, but the best position to really make that happen.
Let me see if I understand what you're saying correctly. You're saying that, let's give a specific example. So Disney bought Pixar. Disney bought Pixar after Toy Story had already been made, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is what you're saying where Disney went right is Disney buys Pixar, and they could have said, oh, great, now we have this IP like Toy Story, and we can go like sell a bunch of merch around it, you know, and now we have this new like kind of licensing business with new IP or something. And so anytime a studio buys IP, you could go that route of just like, let's just sell the shit out of these t-shirts. Or you can go, okay, let's lean into creating incredible stories, continuing to extend the storylines, you know, like their Disney's Marvel acquisition. Let's really build out this Marvel universe, even, you know, use the comic book stories that exist, even the more obscure ones, and really build out this universe, and then let the merch stuff happen later as a byproduct. Is that what you're saying? Because that feels so like such an obvious way to go about it. Like, so I'm trying to see if I'm missing who are the examples, or what are examples of doing this the wrong way and going merchandising first?
Well, I don't want the
you
best
don't call
way.
anybody out specifically.
I don't want to call. Yeah, what I would say is that
Hypothetically.
there's a lot of pressure inside the studios, all of them, to do big licensing programs. Oh, we have acquired this big IP. Let's go crazy with it. I'll never forget. Towards like my last 2 months or 3 months at Disney was when they announced the Star Wars acquisition, and I'll never forget. When the news hit the wires, I didn't know about it ahead of time. The news hit the wire, and we were in a meeting with the video game guys, and the meeting completely got derailed as soon as the news hit, because the conversation went, oh, we're going to make a video game about this, and we're going to make a video game about that, and we're going to make a video game about this. And everyone, and I'm sure that meeting was copied over in the consumer products team with say t-shirts and Legos and you name it. And what happened was basically they were sold, all stop. You're not going to do any of that. We're going to let the brand and the team at Lucasfilm, which was led by Kathy Kennedy, still is, tell us what do they want to do for the stories, and how are we going to build this strategically. We're just not going to go out and sell $1 billion in merchandise for the sake of doing it. We're going to wait and pause, and we're going to lose opportunity in the short term to make sure we get it right for the long term. And so how this played out in my world frequently is that we would get opportunities like, say, I'll just say a video game. And, oh, we can make $500,000 this year on this video game, and we're behind on our revenue, so let's do it. And my answer would be, no, you can't do that. You need to wait, because we have a multi-million-dollar opportunity 3 years down the road or 2 years down the road. And if we do this now, we lose that. And I'd rather take $2 million in 2 years than $500,000 this year. And usually when that happened, it would get elevated to one-time Bob Iger, but usually like the layer right below him. And I won that argument every time, because I was always thinking we need to think about the long-term health and vitality of these brands. So coming back, how this really ties into Web3 is, where are the Web3 opportunities sitting within the enterprise? Like, what team is managing them? Where is that team's reporting structure? And what is their mandate? Like, is it find revenue and go do deals? Is it think long term and figure out how Web3 is going to come in and complement storytelling? And where does it fit within that storytelling? Does it come with a movie, after a movie, before it? So those are the kind of decisions that have to be made. And I think where some of the studios have this currently structured is around, it's a licensing opportunity. It's merchandise. And I understand why they've gone that way, because it's very easy to get their head around it to start with. But I think the successful projects long-term, meaning say 18 months out, 12 months out and beyond, have to come more on the development side, where stories are being created and franchises are being planned like 5 years out, 8 years out, and so on. And my belief is that a lot of these studios will hire a Web3 storytelling person within the development team to sit side by side with the people developing movies and TV shows. So I'm looking. That's something I'm looking to see happen in the news here as we watch and observe.
I've totally derailed us. We have like 30 news stories to talk about, but I actually think this is really valuable, especially for, call it a kickoff episode. You and I have talked about some of this in past episodes, but I think you're fleshing this out even further here. And I want to ask one more question, which is anything you can share. And I'm being sensitive because, again, I know you consult with projects now that are doing certain things, and I don't know what is or is not able to be made public, but like the merchandising side of this is easier to wrap your head around, right? Like it for everyone, it's so clear cut. When you talk about it starting from early development stages, can you paint a bit of a picture of what that might look like? Like if you have an NFT project starting in a more of a development phase, how that can play out?
Yeah. So let's take a hypothetical example. Let's talk about, let's use Star Wars. So let's say Disney's developing future Star Wars movies. Of course, there's people working on that every single day. I believe the next one is currently scheduled for 2025. So, well,
hasn't there been scandal around that? Wasn't it one of those things where it got like pushed back and it keeps saying it's going to get made and then it didn't? That was part of like the Chapek Iger.
I don't think it has anything to do with Chapek and Iger. I think it just is they're trying to figure out how Star Wars should work. Got it. But let's say that film is coming out in 2025. I think that's the right timing. Right now, if they wanted some sort of NFT experience or next generation storytelling experience to accompany that, more than licensing, when should they start working on that? And the answer I would say is right now. They should be working, sure, it's years away, but the teams working on the Web3 experience should be working side by side with the development execs who are developing that movie and thinking about them cohesively, so it tells a unified story to the audience when they're released. Now, who are the development execs? That might be a good thing to answer here. So when I talk about development execs, these are the in-house employees at the studios. It's usually traditionally the most prestigious, the highest paid people in Hollywood. And they're the ones that are going to breakfast with writers, lunches with the directors, and dinners with the actors to try to help set these projects up. So when you think of like a producer working on a show, let's say Jerry Bruckheimer, you're probably one of the biggest producers there has been for years. When he's putting together his movies, he's not doing that entirely on his team or in isolation. The studio is sitting with him side by side and saying, yeah, you're the producer, but we control the budget and we need to make sure we're signing off on the talent and the director as much as you are. And so it's very much a collaborative process where these in-house executives are having these meetings, having these discussions about, is that really the right kind of story for our brand? Let's find an example. So, if we want a Star Wars character to go to a certain new planet, that's not entirely a decision of one person, that they need to make sure that fits the brand. If a Star Wars character is going to do something out of character, that there's a lot of work around that. And so that's what the development team does. And so since they're on the first rung of working with the creatives, developing the content and the writing, having the Web3 team work with them directly daily is a very strong and good way to set that up.
And what's something that they could start doing? Is it we should incorporate moments in the movie that you can mint an NFT around that can give you access to an experience, Star Wars experience in Disneyland? I don't know where Star Wars is, but like what are some of those pieces that could start getting integrated?
Yeah, I'd make just two recommendations to any of the teams, any of the development teams in Hollywood, which is either bring in an in-house person to be your in-house expert in the space and really make it a true expert on Web3, not someone who just bought an NFT and suddenly is the expert, but someone who really has experience and knows the Web3 community and knows the technologies the pros and cons with every technology and knows the community. So bring one of those people in-house, either as an employee or bring them in as a kind of a production consultant, maybe something they're more comfortable with to start with, but really have that dialogue and start that conversation going. If you're a hardcore fan and you really love this story and you want to experience more, just like you might buy a book that extends it or a video game that extends it, there can be a Web3 experience that extends storytelling, tells you additional, they call it distant mountains. It's what happened over there? Well, it gives you that distant mountain. So that's a storytelling experience. There can be more marketing related experience, like building a fan community around the property that gives you some utility, like maybe someone wins a prize to the premiere, or other prizes or ways to build that community and fanship. That might be more on the marketing side, but that's also a possibility. But I think there are things that we haven't done yet in this space, and that is on that storytelling aspect. Like, how do you augment and build on the storytelling? How do you tell those distant mountains through Web3? Or how do you lead into them? How do you do a Web3 activation before the movie comes out that sets up some of the characters or worlds or new ships or weapons, whatever it is, and gives you some of those as a buildup into the release?
Yeah, that's that next gen storytelling.
Yeah, we haven't seen that yet. Or the other final piece I'll put this, and this is what the team at Feature are doing quite a bit of thinking around, is how does it just support storytelling? Like, not really be the purpose. So it's not to use Web3 to tell more stories, but it's how does Web3 add an element of engagement below that main content? So you have the film, but is there an aspect for those who choose to participate that allows additional depth through Web3 storytelling? And that's, I think, going to be a very rich area for all the studios in the future.
Do y'all realize what's happening over at Ledger? That the #1 leader in digital asset security has teamed up with Tony Fadell, builder of the iPod, to revolutionize the experience of owning digital assets securely. They're doing this with Ledger STAX. This is the most premium product to date, and it's so user-friendly. Ledger STAX is a palm-sized device with a new e-Ink 2 display on the cover and around the spine, meaning you can view and confirm transactions at a glance. You can also customize your ledger by displaying your favorite NFT on the cover, even when the device is off. Pair your new Ledger STAX with your Ledger Live to manage, earn, and hodl all your NFTs and over 500 coins. This space needs sleek user experiences, our iPod moment, and that's what Ledger has set out to do here without compromising their core promise of security. Keep your digital assets in the safest place they can be, a Ledger STAX wallet. Trust yourself with Ledger STAX and go to shop.ledger.com to pre-order your Ledger STAX now. They're shipping in April. And if you use the link in our show notes to pre-order now, you'll be helping the show as well. Thank you. We've been talking about Disney throughout this as our hypothetical examples, and obviously it's a big part of your background. And Disney doesn't talk about the metaverse particularly, but they do talk about next gen storytelling. And I feel like that tends to be the term they use for it. I know that was what Bob Chapek is using at the D23 conference. Of course, now you've got Bob Iger in, who is an investor in Genies and has since he had retired, of course now has unretired, but after he retired, talked about digital collectibles and things. So I think as much as, or maybe more than, Chapek is a huge steward and proponent of this stuff, it seems. Would love to get your take on that.
I hope that they keep the next generation storytelling term. Yeah. I like it a lot. Obviously, NFT is not the best term anymore, but what it really is leaning into is this idea that future storytelling, it can have this aspect of interactivity. Yeah. Of how does a person in the audience engage with content in different ways. So think like you're watching Disney Plus, you're watching the National Treasure show is streaming right now. How can you, as you're watching that, have social interaction with friends or even strangers through that platform? How does Disney Plus become hey, you're watching that and you love that costume and you can buy it as an NFT, and that's more of like a licensing static model? Or how can there be other experiences that are enabled? How can you connect a wallet to Disney Plus? These are Web3. So think like a token. You get a token for watching. This is what I think of next generation storytelling. That is what Disney is building up to. And they've been somewhat quiet, which is good. They're building, not really kind of out launching projects that aren't working yet. So I think it's good that they're doing that. The thing that between Iger and Chapek, I think they're both equally a fan of it. They're taking this perspective of the Hollywood model has to change. this architectural innovation is coming in, although they're probably not thinking of it like that. But they're seeing that they need new models of monetization, new opportunities. So they're smart enough, both of them, not to turn their backs on it, and both of them will embrace it.
And the recent bit of news that I was going to highlight is Disney's building a new ad engine. I'm reading here a little bit. So, they've been a little bit vague on it, but it's the Disney Plus is adding an ad-supported model, as all these streamers seem to be doing. And the ad engine that's going to power that ad is both sort of sophisticated in terms of knowing what ad to plug in for which viewers when. So it's dynamic in that sense. This is not like static. You make an ad buy and everybody's seeing the same ad at the same time. It's based on that's my understanding, is that it's a more sophisticated like ad platform. But there's also been these reports that seem to suggest that this ad platform is tied into this next gen storytelling, maybe this like metaverse play that Disney is making. Would love to get your thoughts or interpretation here.
Yeah. It's a mixed bag from my perspective. The mixed bag, the pro is that it's an indicator that they're building in the space. Now, no surprise, I wouldn't expect them to take their foot off the gas pedal. It probably should be no surprise to anyone that there will be advertising in the metaverse. I don't know why, but there was an old song from the 70s, "The Revolution will be televised." For some reason, I just had this idea, the revolution will be advertised. So no surprise there'll be advertising. Now, the negative sides of this mixed bag is this is probably not the messaging that should have gone out first about, or at least should even be current about next generation storytelling. There might be a reason about ad buys and the ad cycle for sales right now. But I think that it would have been better to lead with the idea of what is the potential of next generation storytelling to enhance and augment the audience experience. What we're talking about, where can you buy NFTs through the Disney Plus platform? Can you, let's say you're watching a Star Wars show on Disney Plus, can you click through and then experience a metaverse experience of that environment? Those are the things I would prefer to hear them leading on in terms of news articles.
To be fair, who knows? I mean, where did this story come from? Who knows what it's CNET. It's CNET. It is CNET. But they're obviously more focused on the tech side of things, and they did have the D23 summit. I don't know if summit's the right word, but they had the Disney conference where they did lead on the storytelling and fantastical elements, and there was that clip going around of that AR where the forest came to life in your living room, and Chapek gave some language. So I feel like they have definitely leaned more heavily into this, and who knows how this particular story, this ad engine story, got picked up.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's could be coming from a weird left field kind of area. The one thing I would point out that's kind of coincidental when we talk about Web3 media metaverse comms from Disney is right before Iger came back as CEO, they were hiring for a head of comms for that next generation storytelling team, led by Mike White. And so I don't know if that person got hired. I don't know if that position went away when Iger came back and they put a hiring freeze in place. So it's just kind of interesting timing that we're talking about Web3 comms from Disney, and they were hiring a person for that role just a few months ago. That
is interesting. Also, in things you're tracking, I know you track these hires and the roles people are looking for as an indication of where the space is going. I think similarly, you could look at that across where the big agents, the big agencies, who they're repping and how they're repping. So, piece of news that came out: Hume signed with CAA. Hume is a decentralized label. They're trying to revolutionize, I guess, like the music label system with digital artists. What do you think of this news?
Yeah, and so I was really curious. believe Hume has spun off a little bit out of the fluff world, Futureverse kind of project.
Yes, Hume is in the Futureverse ecosystem. It's actually funny, when I interviewed McDonald, why am I blanking on his first name? The CEO of Futureverse. He mentioned, I said, Hume is in your ecosystem, and he kind of like corrected me. So I don't know. The relationship there is a relationship there. It's in the ecosystem in some capacity, and their first digital star, Angel Baby, is a fluff.
Yeah, and they're calling them Metastars.
Yes, they're called Metastars, but I think Hume has its own independent backers. You know what I mean? Like it's not just a subsidiary. I know some investors in Hume, and so it's
very, a very different project, but a little bit like Jenkins and how it sits next to Bored Apes, or Jimmy's project, Kingship sits with apes
Bored
as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe very similar. So there's a couple things here. It's another project signing with an agency. We saw this recently with Moonbirds, who went to WME, if I'm correct.
Moonbirds went to UTA.
UTA. Mac Flavell and the Big Head Club signed with WME. We had some other announcements recently of Tally Labs is represented by CAA, and Cool Cats are also represented by CAA. So,
and a lot of the artists are rep by UTA. You've got Seneca, the Bored Ape artist, is rep by UTA, and Thank You X, and a number of sort of on the art side are on the UTA side.
I think it's a positive sign. We're going to see more of these. It's not something that's available for everyone. Obviously, they're going to have a limited roster of projects they can represent. What I'm really interested in is a couple things here is that, first of all, where music projects are going. I think this year I'm tracking a lot of music projects. In addition to Hume, we've got Kids of the Apocalypse is minting right this moment. Sonic Heads is coming soon.
I forgot. Yeah.
SonaStream is coming, which is it's more of a protocol than a project, and of course Kingship. So I think this is going to be a big year for music. So I'm looking at it through that lens, that we're going to see a lot of Web3 music projects break through, hopefully. One of the things that got my attention in the press release was how they talked about the services that would be provided by CAA, and what got my attention, and always, I'll just say it irks me a little bit, kind of tying back to our licensing discussion, is the first service that was listed in the order was licensing and merchandise opportunities. And absolutely, I'm sure those are huge opportunities for a virtual artist like Angel Baby and the other metastars. Is that really what you want an agency to do for you, though?
Well, so here's this meta question about agencies. And, I'm experiencing this a little bit firsthand because I've been talking to some agents and trying to figure it out, is in this new world where you have a lot of revenue by going direct to consumer via NFTs and a lot of opportunities that come through via social media, what you need an agent for is less than maybe it was in like a past life. And where can the agents make money off you is sort of the question. Where are they providing value, where there's a clear cut, where they can take their 10% or their 15% or whatever it is, right? And it's getting kind of trickier to find that and to be like, where does it make sense for agents to take their cut? I don't know if this should be read as this is like the priority for Hume, or if this should be read as like that's an easy way for that's like the clear cut way where CAA can get a 10% cut while they do other things as well. I don't know, but it strikes me that those are some easy deals they can try and make.
One possible way to look at it is that this to set up a Web3 media company, let's describe Hume in that lens, takes infrastructure. You need a partnerships person, you need a storytelling person or people, and it's more than one of these projects can afford or even focus on. And trying to find someone, as we were talking before the show started, find someone who's Web3 savvy and an expert in entertainment promotions is really tough, and brand partnerships. So maybe that's an easy payment to make, to say, hey, take your 15% or 10% and just take that part of infrastructure that we'd have to build off of our hands. So maybe that's kind of the way that they're looking at it.
Also, and again, because this is kind of, I'm having some of these conversations lately, but it's like, let's say they want CAA to help them place talent, right? Like, hey, we need to make these hires. Can you help us make these hires? Can you help us? CAA is going, great, sure, but we can't make money giving you a hire, right? Like, we're not a recruitment agency. That's not, so we need something, we need an area to make money on you to be able to help you with all these other things. So then they say, okay, go take our IP, go license it, go merchandise it, help get our name everywhere, make your money on that, and then also help us by helping to place talent with us or to do these other things that are less immediately kind of monetizable if you're the agent.
Yeah, I was going to say time to monetization, to set up a film project, you're talking years.
The time to monetization is long.
if you had the announcement today, you're talking 2 to 3 years at best before there would ever be a project released into the market. Whereas a licensing deal, you can have those T-shirts out in a month.
Mm-hmm.
This
really
does motivated.
Get us to the David Horvath piece, which I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole. We definitely should at some point on this show. We should have David Horvath come on. But you turned me on to him and some of his amazing pieces and his thought work around, like, should these brands be monetizing this immediately around merchandising and licensing and trying to go big in this way? Like, will this lead to... It can lead to success in the short term, but it also leads to flaming out more quickly if you make a bunch of deals, as opposed to trying to get what he would describe as evergreen ubiquity, which happens through a slower burn of not making a ton of deals up front, but slowly working your way into the culture. I don't know if you have a perspective on this.
Yeah. First of all, I love David Horvath. I'm a big fan of and follower of his work. I would recommend everyone follow him on Twitter, follow his newsletter, which he just started in December and has already published like 20 some episodes, issues of his newsletter. It's just a wealth of information. If you don't know who David Horvath is, he was the creator, probably best known as the creator of Ugly Dolls, which is a brand he incubated, did many licensing deals, entertainment deals, sold the brand to the studio known as STX, and they did the feature film based on that. He also developed the Bossy Bear franchise, which is coming this year on Nickelodeon. So his second franchise to come into a show. And he's very deep in the Web3 space, particularly in the nouns. He owns a noun, which I'm very jealous of. He's very involved in the Nounsol. He's the head of the Nouns studio, so thinking about how to take Nouns content and turn it into original storytelling. So definitely someone who's really important to follow. And what he's writing about in his newsletter is you really have two paths to go. And I'll grossly simplify it to two paths. One is you can believe and go down the road that you're the next Disney or the next monster storytelling franchise. And you can do that, but likely in 7 years, even in the greatest success, likely within 7 years, you're done. You're burned out, you're done. And for a lot of people, that's good enough. You've made a lot of money, go retire in the Caribbean, whatever. And for most people, that might be okay. But if you really want to impact culture and do something that really just has a lasting long-term impact, something like a Hello Kitty, there's a better way. There's a different way that you have to go. And that is starting small and being very strategic about where you go, even down to the specific store and window that you need to have your products in, and the specific partners that you have to partner with to get, say, a publishing project done. And going that road can lead to that. But you're talking decades of building to see that result. And for a small number of projects, that's what matters more. And that's where he's focused is. If you want to go down that big road, go ahead. I don't care. But I'm not going to be the person for you. If you want to go down this very culturally relevant, impactful road, then follow me.
I'm talking to him at some point. I want to talk about various ways to get him on the show or the podcast or contributing to the newsletter, because I think he's brilliant. So we'll keep people posted on that front. So there are a few things we're tracking here, Jon, that we might want to give a little bit more time to, so we won't bring them up now. Do you want to talk about StoryDAO now and becoming StoryCo, or do you think we should do a deeper dive later?
I think we can just a quick overview of it right now. So StoryDAO, which I'll put in the genre, in my term, of a writer's room project. So same genre that I'm putting in the Adamverse, Robert McElhaney's project, and the Jenkins the Valet project. StoryDAO is now rebranded to StoryCo. So they had a lot of news in the last week. Their rebrand is one, which makes sense. That's a more probably favorable approach for general consumers and audiences, and maybe for the Hollywood community that they want to cater to, that's probably more addressable. So I think that's a good rebrand. They've announced a seed raise, so $6 million raised, which I didn't realize that they weren't yet at seed round. So great. Funding is good, particularly at this market.
In this environment, time, yep.
All good for them. And the other one is they announced their first project, which they're calling the Disco Ball. Oddly set in outer space, so interesting title for it. I'm sure it'll come full circle and close it. But they announced their first community storytelling project, which I think is just exciting. It's the first of these writers' room projects. Jenkins had the Azurbala book, but I think it's the first of these beyond that have launched. So I'm watching that closely.
Are you bullish on collective storytelling like this?
In general, yes. But I would say I am bearish on a writer room of 10,000 people suddenly coming up with the next Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
I think
so bearish on that. So bearish. I'm so bearish on that.
But I want to believe that these projects, the three that we mentioned, are going to understand that and are they not setting up that kind of system? Yeah,
and I know none of them are. None of them are setting up that kind of system. I know like Derek Edwards and I talked about StoryDAO a bit on the Proof. When I went on the Proof XYZ or Proof 100 Proof, 100 Proofs, pod. Derek and I talked about it, and Derek's quite bullish on StoryCo, now StoryCo. And they're obviously being savvy about not just being like, it's all just a free for all, collective storytelling. Adamverse, same thing for sure. I know they're they're trying a bunch of different models of like small cohorts that, with a lead, each cohort has a leader, and then, the kind of the rising stars from the older cohorts can be the leaders for future cohorts. And, how do we use this as a mechanism to surface talent? It's a free for all where 10,000 people can, I just think it's a lot of work. And I just think it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
and
I think
I wonder how it'll play out.
There's going to be some painful moments, certainly some failures. One of the reasons I'm bullish in general on the space, if it's set up the right way, is that we talked about these megatrends that are emerging. One of those megatrends, which is around Web3, is that individual creators are going to increasingly, out of the Hollywood system, move into being independent, essentially called independent operators. That as new opportunities for monetization and financing and distribution come into play, that you'll have creators who just say, I'm done. You have people who've created major top 10 franchises who haven't gotten a paycheck in 10 years for their creation and are pissed. I'm not going to name these people individually, but I'm working with two of them right now. I mean, people who are like household names in the Hollywood community who are so pissed that their next projects are in Web3 because they'd rather own the monetization, even if it's much smaller. Now, granted, they have multi-generational wealth, so they don't have to worry about it too much, but big names moving into the space because they can control and own their IP. And so I believe that this is going to fit into that mega trend of creators are going to have more control and ownership of their IP. There's going to be marketplaces and brokerages set up to market and sell that IP. And so that's something I'm very closely watching. And I believe these writer-owned projects kind of fall into that model or fit there in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And I can relate to it in my own way, right? Like I own my IP, and that's a very powerful thing that for so many generations previous, really wouldn't have been possible. And I wouldn't do it without that. So, very interesting. Final story you want to flag, Jon, and then we'll wrap up. Should we talk about some of the IP stuff in DC? It feels like more depressing and less fun, but it feels like important to eat our vegetables along those lines.
Sure. So rewind to June or July of last year, the United States Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Intellectual Property, who the hell knew that existed, sent a letter to the U.S. Copyright and Patent and Trademark offices, so two different government offices, to request a study on NFTs. Now, who are the senators, first of all? Well, the heads of the subcommittee are Thomas Tills, I believe from North Carolina, and Senator Patrick Leahy from Vermont, the two kind of Republican and Democrat. They sent the letter. Fast forward a couple months, it's taken months to set up the study, but the copyright and patent offices are now working on that study. As part of it, they've had 3 days of 7-hour-long each day roundtables to discuss day 1 trademarks, day 2 patents, day 3, which was yesterday, January 31st, copyrights. So I sat in 21 hours of government roundtable meetings so that you don't have to. There's a lot to come out of it. I still have to process my notes. I actually took notes of all the speakers but a couple key themes that came out of it, which I want to kind of flag, is that surprisingly in the trademarks discussion, there was a lot of talk, and Unstoppable Domains had a representative who spoke. So I'm glad that they were there. But a lot of companies were really upset about this new Web3 domain system, that they see it as a future era of cyber squatting. One person even said, quote, decentralization is the problem here, unquote. And we're asking that action be taken. And I felt like for the first time, I could see big industry, big companies fighting Web3, not because of what Web3 offers, but because of the risks it brings to the table, that they have to go protect their brand names or their trademarks. And they're asking for legislation to fix that. So that was the big takeaway from that day. Patents, there wasn't a lot that day. I have to really go through my notes again. It's not quite my area. And a lot of people in the patent discussion actually turned it into more copyright discussion. So I felt like the panel wasn't very well put together in that regard. You get to copyrights, and it was interesting. We had a number of Web3 projects there. Deadfellas had a representative who spoke. And the big thing that really struck me on copyrights, it was that there's worry about the marketplaces. Talk about OpenSea, and there were like 4 representatives of the recording industry, different aspects of it, and they were very much what you'd expect with the recording industry, falling into stereotype of resistant of the technology and about artists getting paid. So I felt like there was a lot of voice and vocal pushback about Web3 until artists can be guaranteed of royalties and guaranteed of payments, and the separation of NFTs from the file. So you may have an NFT that's a token on the blockchain, but the file is hosted somewhere else. And it was all about taking down content. So I felt like that set a negative tone for the copyright panel.
What also strikes me as funny, and you can't paint anything with one brush, but I'm like, whoa, these the same lawyers that negotiated the Spotify deal that cut the artists out? Like, congratulations, you now care about artist royalty payments. You who ushered in all of the music streaming platforms that pay artists pennies relative to their labels. Like, you know what I mean? I sort of feel, but again, I'm sure it's maybe these are artist representatives in particular.
The funny part is they had the woman who represented the Motion Picture Association, the MPAA. She had been the lawyer who represented the recording industry, the RIAA, during the pre-Spotify, the Napster era. And so she was the head of that legal department that went after Napster. And I was blown away. She was actually making comments that were, I would say, fairly complimentary, like soft hand. I want to re-listen because I can't believe what I heard. That this is a bit of a different, maybe the MPAA is actually a fan or a supporter here.
That's very interesting. I think we should do even if it's a mini episode and it's just 20 minutes, like I think we should dive in and break this down a little bit once you've processed your notes, or maybe we just publish something written. But I do think this is important, right? This is, and we had spoken about this, that this was coming down the pike when you came on. Oh, you've come on 4 times, Jon.
Four times? Maybe 4.
Maybe. When you came on for the panel with DC Investor and
the trademark
and
copyright.
You did the trademark and copyright conversation with us, and we mentioned that some of this, was coming down the pike in terms of government actors sort of looking into this from a trademark and copyright perspective. I mean, that's another. At some point, we can cover the trial of
Ryder Ripps,
Yuga Labs trial, but. I think that's a good summary for now. We should dive deeper. I do think this is obviously incredibly important. And with that, I think we close episode 1 of Blockbuster, brought to you by Overpriced JPEGs. Right now, just Overpriced Blockbuster, all on the same feed.
Or is it Blockbuster, an Overpriced JPEGs podcast?
Yeah, Blockbuster, an Overpriced JPEGs production, or Overpriced media production. We're shopping this now. What am I workshopping this? So tweet at us what you liked, what you want to see. I think we'll keep it here for now because you and I both are a bit bandwidth constrained. And with that, thanks for listening.
See you soon, everyone.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.